Welcome to Scorched Earth and a general reading. Ooh, I've mangled my cards. General reading for the sign of Aquarius, Sun, Moon, or Ascendant for Cancer season, or, the month of June, the month of July 2026, whatever your timing paradigm is. I am here for it. I hope you are well. I'm using the 777 deck for you today because I love it and it's awesome. And so, things to tell you before we begin. If the reading resonates with you and you'd like to go a little bit deeper, there will be an extended that you can access at the end. That's via the links in the description box below. The first link will take you to Selfie if you just want the extended for this video alone. However, if you want access to all of the extended content that I make every month, which is actually a considerable amount, you might consider coming to join my private community, the Order of the Phoenix, over on the Circle platform. There you can get access to the extendeds for all of the signs, so you can watch for your sun and your moon and your ascendant and all that kind of thing. Additionally, you also get access to the weekly energy readings that I do every single week. This week's run to an hour and a half, interestingly enough. So that's a weekly phenomenon. You can also participate in the Deccan Walk, which is, we're 6 decans in now, I think, to 36. So there's still some considerable time to go on that one. And if you join at the higher tier, you can come participate in the classes that we run over there as well, in all sorts of modalities, not just tarot. Yeah, bit of everything. So if that sounds interesting to you, you know what to do with those links below. In fact, there's all sorts of things in the description box. You should go check it out. Let's flip this around here, Aquarius, and talk about what we're going to do here today. So we're going to start off with the most important question that you can ask yourself in 2026, which is, where am I right now? It is only from that point that we are able to navigate to the second most important question, which is, what is the next step? And so we will look at those two. But the cards in between are going to look at, somewhat inspired by the Deccan Walk actually, what area of your life requires nourishment or emotional investment right now. This could be relationships of all sorts. Doesn't have to be romantic or sexual relationships. We could be talking about friendships, work relationships, that kind of thing, or it could be the relationship that you have with yourself. We're right on the precipice of the North Node moving into your sign, and it would be completely understandable if you just wanted to take a minute to catch your breath before before everything gets very loud, which is what I think is going to happen in Cancer season, and it's just going to escalate from there because, we've got Pluto in your sign on one side of the chart. We're also going to have the North Node there, but Jupiter is going to be moving into Leo, and so opposing everything that we've got going on there. Obviously, the South Node will be in Leo, but there will be eclipses in Leo too, solar eclipses in Leo. All of which is happening across the circle from you, and so there will be some sort of effect on you with that. And again, I've never heard anybody describe it like this, but for me, that Leo Aquarius axis is the masses, depending on where you're standing in that. Anyway, you get a lot of people in one place, and stuff tends to start getting loud. So. Anyway, let's have a look and see what the cards have to say. So we're going to start with question number 1. Where are you right now? Where is Aquarius right now? We have the Queen of Pentacles on her side. That's Capricorn energy. We have a reversal. We have the 7 of Wands. And we have the Page of Swords here. 10 of Swords is at the bottom of the deck, which is, interestingly, at the time of recording this, which is before the start of Cancer season, is actually the decan that represents Gemini 3, the card that represents the energy of Gemini 3, 10 of Swords. A card which, for me, as I've been trying to make the case for recently, I absolutely fucking love this card, and I love the energy that it represents too. A lot of people look at this and they see, the legitimate but potentially rather surface interpretations of humiliation and betrayal and left for dead and everything's awful and dreadful and whatnot. But for me, I see it more as a representation of reaching the limits of our cognition. And in fact, to some extent, I'm actually seeing that reflected in these cards here, where belief systems are tested and they don't stand up to scrutiny. If you recall, in Gemini season, I believe that was literally the middle question that we were asking, at what belief systems are ripe for renewal right now. Ten of Swords is an acknowledgement of the fact that we've reached that point. So whether it's beliefs about yourself, beliefs about, you in the world and what you're here to do, and how everything works, if you're at a state of questioning, or like Socrates realizing that you know nothing, which is one of my favorite things, well, not favorite probably, but most often repeated, is I literally know nothing. The more I know, the less I know, if you know what I mean. Anyway, it's kind of an expression of having reached that state. And what I like about the cards on the table is the extent to which you are open to new information. There's a breakdown of the rigidity, which is interesting because it's not often a word that you would associate with Aquarius because of your openness to new ideas, right? But there's something fundamental here that seems to have shifted for you in terms of the structural container within which you live, right? And belief systems that go along with that. Now, as fixed air, which Aquarius is, there has to be, by definition, something that is kind of rigid there because, like all the fixed signs, you're designed to carry an entire season. It's about maintenance. It's about consistency. So although there is an apparent fluidity with the way that you think about new ideas, and you can, kind of deal in the abstract probably more than an awful lot of other signs can do, there's an underlying rigidity that's been exposed. And potentially this rigidity is quite simply beliefs that you have about yourself. I mentioned that this represents a sign of Capricorn, right? And therefore Saturn. But for me, the Queen of Pentacles is all about what it is that the reasons why. The queens all do this. They consider the reasons why, and they help us understand the quality of and the value of whatever suit they represent, right? So here in the case of the Pentacles, it is about belief systems. It's like, what do you believe in enough that you would stand up for it? What do you believe about the way that the world works? What is your value system? What are your core principles? The fact that the Queen of Pentacles has shown up on her side means there is a little bit of fluidity here, which may feel like a breakdown of some sort. And yet I would advocate for looking at it from a slightly different position, because these two are, speaking in harmony here, saying, no, there's a revision going on here in terms of the way that you are approaching what has been previously very rigid. Because Seven of Wands in reverse is a dropping of the defenses. It's not needing to fight for something. It's losing the rigidity of the moment. And you look at even how he's positioned there, right? He's bracing himself. You've done any kind of physical combat sport at all, you get yourself into fighting stance, right? And there is simultaneously the ability to be able to move quite quickly in response to the situation, because you can just bounce, from one spot to another, but at the same time holding a level of tension that makes you very difficult to move if you don't want to move. So here, a card that speaks of sometimes defensive, protective, guarded energies, and braced and tense and all that sort of stuff. Well, not tense, but like that, plyometric, explosive kind of energy here. It's not present when the Seven of Wands is in reverse, saying we don't need to fight this, or we don't need to be tense about this. We can kind of roll with this and be a little bit more fluid, because the structural container within which our belief system has sat is changing. Has changed, is in the process of changing. There's a level of recognition here across the board, Aquarius, that I really like to see, because it's not like this is cutting your knees out from underneath you. You know, you're well aware of what's happening here. But that Page of Swords is a level of humility in the face of it, which I really like. I mean, you might say the same about the Ten of Swords there. And if that anything where you're prepared to be less rigid than you have been before, is always a place of growth for me, right? And corresponding humility. So this Page of Swords being here is now an openness to new information, a recognition that new information is required, because pages are the beginning part of a new journey of swords. Now, you are the King of Swords. You sit as the masculine epitome of the suit, with the Libra Queen of Swords being your corresponding part, and it's the pair of them together that actually form the epitome of the suit. But you've got the masculine side of that. Libra is the feminine side. So there's a recognition of a journey where you are a beginner rather than, and so as to say a page rather than a king. You don't have all of the answers. You don't have a rigid container within which all the answers exist. Everything's kind of a little bit more ephemeral than that. I think sometimes the Page of Swords can look a little bit wistful. In other decks that I've got, I'm thinking like the Llewellyn, the Page of Swords actually looks really quite grave, like he's about to impart bad news. But this one seems ready. I think that's the word that I would use to describe him. He seems ready. There's something's caught his attention. He understands the importance of what he's just noticed. He may not yet understand the full extent of what he's just noticed, but he recognizes that it represents a change from the way things have been before. Now, let me just let's give this a shuffle. This is the triple goddess that I'm using to clarify for me. Tell me about the Page of Swords, please. Well, that's the Wheel of Fortune, my friends, with the Magician, who... The Three of Pentacles is at the bottom of the deck. And it's interesting that we, in Cancer season, it is likely that our relationships may be coming up front and centre, but it's not necessarily as straightforward as whether I get on with this person or not, or whether this person thinks the same way that I do, right? The Three of Pentacles is about cooperation and collaboration and working together with people, and ostensibly to build something that is going to last for a long time. Then we have Cancer, which is, like I said, deeply associated with all sorts of relationships with other humans, no matter what label we put on them or where they sit in the hierarchy of relationships, because, we all kind of do that. But we've got double major arcana here underneath a page, and that feels so significant to me, because there is a way of looking at this that absolutely emphasizes exactly what I said right at the beginning, which is that there is a pause here. There's a moment of reflection. There's a moment of not only integration but discovery. With the Wheel of Fortune showing up like this, we have the energies of fate and fortune and destiny interrupting proceedings, or coming to participate in proceedings, perhaps is the better way to put it. But we also have the Magician here too. And this feels like a strengthening of your position. It's not that everything's coming apart, it's that it's coming together. But that's the interesting thing with the Wheel of Fortune, is that often whatever's being woven is incomprehensible at this point. We can't see the big picture. We don't know where it's all going. But there's certainly a sense here of a shift and a change, particularly with how you relate to other people and the way that you choose to work with other people. But it's getting ready for, it's quite literally spooling up for something really quite dramatic over the course of Cancer season. We often talk about shifts and changes, and fuck me if we haven't talked about that a lot in 2026, right? But this is This is strikingly overt. Now, I can't remember the date that the North Node moves into your sign. I have it in my head that it's around about the end of July, but I would need to double check. I would suggest that you go double check that. Because if it is the end of July, then we're into Leo season when that happens, which is to say the sun will be in the sign of Leo, your opposite sign. And this feels much more contemporaneous. It doesn't feel like it's 6 weeks out. It feels like the shifts are starting to happen now. And although I really fucking hate the digital words because I think they're reductive, there is an enormous upgrade happening here that to some extent you almost don't need to participate in exactly in terms of the changes that are happening for you. You merely need to be a witness to them and allow that fluidity to continue. That Three of Pentacles is really interesting though, because this does have the quality of potential, cooperations and collaborations coming in sideways that you didn't really anticipate, potentially. What's underneath there? Five of Pentacles. You see, that feels like problem and solution to me. And particularly a problem that is individually experienced with a collective solution to it. Five of Pentacles is quite often a card of isolation. In amongst other things, I mean, we actually covered this in a deck and walk, and it was stunning. How many different ways it showed up. I'm always talking about the Five of Pentacles as being, poverty, lack, or a fear thereof. And what really came out in the deck and walk was how strongly this was related to fear rather than the reality of a situation. Right, it's 5, so it's always moving around. It is inherently unstable, but then you compare it to the 3, that is fundamentally stable. And we've got everybody doing their bit. So whether it's a problem that exists or a problem that you anticipate, it seems like people will be, on the one hand, part of the solution of that, but there's also this thing that's being individually experienced by you that is happening at the same time. And it's so powerfully creative without having any edges yet. There will always be edges, there will always be boundaries. I mean, how are you going to bust past the boundaries if they don't exist, Aquarius? Like, do you know what I mean? So let's have a look and see what needs nourishment and emotional investment by Aquarius at this time. We have the Queen of Swords in reverse, very interesting. We also have the Page of Wands in reverse. Tell me more about this, please. We have the Six of Cups, which I'm going to take as being in reverse. Let's just move those two clarifiers up there to sit with the page. Say more, please. Fucking hell. Six of Wands in reverse with the Moon. Now, on the face of it, that's a canny, confusing configuration of cards. We have got the subjective, internal understanding mechanism of the Queen going on here, and she's reversed. So we have a lack of understanding going on. We have a Page of Wands who is also reversed. So rather than preparing for a big, shiny new journey, Page is like, well, I can't go anywhere. Can't do anything. We've got the Six of Cups in reverse, which is indicating a no going back moment. And then we have the Six of Wands in reverse, Jupiter in Leo, which is the transit that's going to be happening at the end of June, so definitely encapsulated within Cancer season. Also showing up in the reverse. Now, depending on how you read the cards, well, no, actually, I'm just going to start issuing some blanket statements. It is not universally true that a reversed card means simply the opposite of what it means in the upright. Sometimes it can be a block or a delay on that energy really showing up. It can show us where we're resisting that energy showing up. Sometimes it can talk about our perception of the situation rather than the reality of the situation. There's quite a lot here that speaks to confusion with a corresponding, and this is going to sound rather counterintuitive, a corresponding level of understanding. But I think it's like a perception of understanding that isn't necessarily accurate. Because if the dominant card at the bottom of the deck here, which it is because it's major arcana, is the moon, we actually only have half of the story. There's a lot of this that is obfuscated. It is, by definition, confusing, potentially illusory. Things do not have distinct form under the light of the moon as they would under the light of the sun. So we might be able to see the shape of things, we might be able to see the outlines of the mountains perhaps, but we cannot see the detail of the paths, we cannot see the quality of the trees that are sitting on the mountain, this kind of thing. We can't tell if they've got leaves or whether they're all, unless they're in silhouette at the top. The point is, everything is the light is diffuse, it isn't clear. And subconsciously, there may well be things that are going on that are coming up to the surface. Now, we've got this illusory, confusing energy over the top of everything, and then we have every single card showing up in the reverse. Now, I'm not sure. Am I not sure? Let me feel around. I've already done the Thread of Cancer season. If you haven't seen that reading, it is designed to be read in tandem or heard in tandem with the individual monthly readings. It gives the collective backdrop within which your particular experience is happening. And there were some very specific messages that came through on that seem to speak directly to what is happening here, to the extent that I want to say that this doesn't feel like it's necessarily your experience. So if we go back to the question that I asked, what needs nourishment? What needs emotional investment? And then we've got this sense of Aquarius being the masses, right? Or sometimes the masses can be Cancer, right? The moon down here. It would be nice to see the Chariot showing up for Cancer season. It's the other card in the major arcana that represents Cancer. But instead we've got the moon. So we don't have forward momentum, we don't have victory, we don't have alignment, we don't have balance, we don't have any of those things. What we've got is confusion. Now, when you pull all of this together, and particularly in the way in which I asked you to bear witness to things, and then we're also talking about how you cooperate, collaborate, and work together with other people, right? Individual problems, collective solutions, or individual fear of problems, collective solutions. And then we see you here going through a moment of change, which has a distinctly karmic flavour to it, but also has the quality of a powering up of you. Then I feel quite confident in saying that these cards here are representative of the energies around you, the people around you, rather than your experience of it themselves. Because the Queen of Swords in reverse is a total lack of understanding, right? The Queen cannot process the information that's coming out. Now, either it's because she doesn't want to, she's in a state of denial. It's not really that likely with the Queen of Swords. Why? Because she puts her emotions to one side when she's considering things. So everything becomes a bit of an academic, intellectual exercise with the Queen of Swords, right? or we have a sense that the things that begin to develop over Cancer season are just so large that people just, their intellectual containers cannot process this kind of information, which would put you at a distinct advantage, Aquarius, because like this is literally what you do in those minutes, those seconds where you're blinking, right? It's off to, I have somebody in my community is an Aquarius, and it's just like infinity, just literally like that. He's just gone, and then he can pull himself back again. Like there is a quality to that that allows you to not necessarily be unflappable in the face of some rather extraordinary information, but certainly perhaps less likely to suffer things like ontological shock, right? Here's the interesting thing, though. Queen of Swords for me is a lower echo of the Justice card. King and Queen, perhaps both lower echoes of the Justice card. So we also have, in addition to the inability to process information that's coming up, a sense of injustice when the Queen of Swords is showing up in reverse. And what's really interesting about this is the level of stuck that these cards represent. If we take the basic interpretation of the Six of Wands in reverse, it is no victory. At the very least, it's a delay on victory. So we're not moving forwards in any kind of victorious fashion. Six of Cups also says we're not going backwards. But the Page of Wands is saying, but we're not preparing to go forwards either. This is oscillating between two different points that is very difficult to understand, very difficult to process, but also feels fundamentally unjust. So if we can't go forwards and we can't go backwards, and there's no sense of victory anywhere, and everything's really confusing, then what we can extrapolate from that is what needs nourishment and emotional investment is the people around you who are struggling to process information in a way that you can. The emotional investment is in assisting people along, even though they don't understand what's happening. What's underneath the moon here? It's a fucking Judgment card. I mean, this is... This is interesting because I have a trifecta of cards, and when any of them show up in combination of two or more, we've got some really big karmic energy at play, like huge. Definitely dragged towards destiny, if you believe in fate and possibly, an interference of fate somewhere. Those three cards are the Justice card, the Wheel of Fortune, and the Judgment card. Well, we've got two of the three, and we've certainly got some sense of, at least an echo of the third showing up here. Now, there's a couple of things that I want to draw your attention to here. First is, I've been banging on about this concept of the teacher, the leader, the guide for 3 years now. For 3 years, we've been preparing for this, and it certainly seemed to be centered around the time frame of 2026 onwards. Right, so there's that there. And I think it's taken 3 years for a lot of people to get to the point where they accept that they may be part of that cohort. Let's put it that way. And I think part of the resistance to the idea in the first place is this thought that everybody's had in their head that they're basically just normal people, right? Oh, it'd be lovely if I could be a hero. It would be lovely if I could be extraordinary, or this kind of thing, right? But there's something very locked in the paradigm of that particular position that that I think we're going to start to see exposed for what it is, which is just part of a narrative of a particular kind of, stage of civilization. When shit goes south, it's a bit like when you're standing in line and the teacher goes, "Oh, I need a volunteer," and then turns around to look at everyone, and literally everybody else has stepped back. And you were just standing there being all like, "God, I hope they don't choose me." And they go, "Oh, Aquarius, very good, let's go." And you go, "What the fuck?" And you turn around and it's like everybody else took a step back. So it looked like you'd step forward. You didn't do anything. You didn't change anything. You were just who you were. But because everybody else backed out, there you are, the chosen one. Now, that's a very loaded term, and I recognize that. So let's be careful with what that means, right? But to draw it all together, what I'm trying to express is the idea that you don't have to be anything other than what you are to be exactly what the situation needs in terms of teaching, leading, guiding. Because if you are one of the few people around you who is not reeling in shock and not so fundamentally overwhelmed, that you don't feel this can't go forwards, can't go backwards, can't go forwards energy, and you're already the computer's already whirring, considering solutions outside of the box that other people would not consider because they can't at this point. This seems to me like it would be very much in alignment with these big fucking energies that I'm showing, that are showing up here. The Wheel of Fortune, the Magician, the fucking Judgment card. Hello, like, I mean, this is strong. So it isn't necessarily about full stop nourishment and emotional investment. It's about allowing your compassion to recognize that people will be in a debilitated state during this time. And if everybody steps back because they're in a debilitated state and they're like, "I can't deal with this," then you're left standing front and center. And there's a mantle being passed to you. Now, there are different transits that you can look at that might suggest the mantle being, pushed in your direction, Pluto in Aquarius being one of them, but definitely the North Node. There we got 18-month period whereby everybody is going to be influenced by that same energy. And does it feel like it might come in with a bang? Yeah, I think this is the fucking power of Pluto behind it, right? Albeit Pluto is in retrograde at the moment and will be, I think, until about October. This looks to me like somebody who is in position without even realizing that they are in position to start doing some really very, very important work from this season onwards. And even though you yourself are in a state of flux, a state of change, because there's something that you've let go of in terms of your internal belief structures, right, that has allowed a kind of fluidity now. Or maybe it is just around the notion that you have anything to contribute, I would imagine most Aquariuses are quite happy with the idea that they have something to contribute, right? But there's that question of hierarchy that always grinds on an Aquarius. The idea of authority also grinds on an Aquarius, and the last thing an Aquarius is going to want to do is become the thing that they despise. And yet, Aquarius, if everybody else stands back, the masses start to need rallying. They need to be brought together. They need you because you care and because you are able to start shepherding people along. You can choose to turn away from that and do something else instead. But there's such a karmic influence on this energy. I don't think that you would want to. Like you as much as everybody else is, more than everybody else is going to feel the hungry ghost pull of the North Node as it starts to drag you towards your destiny, kicking and fucking screaming. and weirdly, it feels like it's starting here. It seems to me, in most instances, to be antithetical to the Aquarian mind that it would be okay for anybody to be in charge. But situations are developing. And in order to be responsive to those situations, like, some part of our rigid belief system is just going to have to, at the very least, get put in a box for a bit. Maybe this is what this is all designed to make you fluid around the idea. Let's put those back there. So, what is the next step for Aquarius, please? Fuck. 3 cards came out together here. We have the World, we have the 5 of Swords, and we have the Lovers card. Very interesting combination. I'm not fucking loving that, though. I'm gonna be honest. What is the next step? Well, yeah, of course, Magician. It's not that I'm not loving the step. 3 of Pentacles spinning out. Right, 5 of Wands. It's not that I'm not loving it. It's just that this is you know, an Aquarius card, and therefore, you know, loosely we could talk about Pluto being in the mix, but this is a Gemini card, and so we could also be talking about Uranus in the mix. I've been eyeballing this conversation that's been going on between Pluto and Aquarius for a while now, and it will continue for a couple of years. And I've heard some people say, "Oh, it's great though. They're speaking, you know, they're trining each other, so that's wonderful." And it's like, no, don't overlay a value to that in terms of whether it will be experienced well or not, right? Because that's a very linear way of thinking. It's a very blinkered way of looking at it. All the trine says is that the energy moves freely between these 2 planets, and they are to some extent charging each other up. Now, whether that has a positive result or a negative result, all it means is that their powers are amplified, they are speaking in harmony. So when you have the planet of upheaval and disruption, and ultimately change and freedom and all that kind of thing, Uranus, your ruler in modern astrology, Saturn is your ruler in ancient astrology. When you've got energy of that showing up, and you've got the god of the underworld showing up, incredibly fucking powerful. And in fact, that, you know, that is his primary concern. You got all of those, you got both of those showing up simultaneously. What we can absolutely, the only thing probably that we can be certain about is that it's not going to be smooth sailing ahead. There is not a consistent energy moving forwards. It's fireworks and grenades going off here, there, and everywhere, right? It's possibly a kind of overload for the entire world, an overload. I mean, we could look at this in the fact that this is Venus, right? Venus in Aquarius. This is you feeling a duty to the world to bring them together. It's a totally different way of looking at the cards, and it's still completely legitimate. The Lover's card is about union and harmony and bringing people together, but it's also about the exercise of free will. So part of what might be being broken down for you, the end of the cycle, if we look at that card that way, is this resistance to you being an authority, this resistance to you being someone in a hierarchical state, because it's what everybody needs. 5 of Swords is wonky thought patterns. The end of the cycle is the end of the thought pattern that says there are no circumstances under which it is acceptable for me to be an authority. Shit's going south. People need you to do that. Will you take the mantle up? The Magician says, I think so. It's the second time we've seen the Magician on the table now. It's the creation of one's own reality. Now, I'm not expecting you to form, some sort of resistance group and be in charge of that. I mean, you can if you'd like. You don't need my permission. It feels more proactive than possibly you might have been of late. We talked a lot in the private community when we were moving through the Aries and Taurus decans about this, these little acts of resistance, and it's that being no, and I'm going to go and do this thing over here. I'm setting something up. I'm initiating something over here, right? It's this establishment of parallel structures alongside structures that are falling down. It's not simply, I'm going to, wave a banner and shout and bang saucepans about things until you give me my rights back or you make everything good again and all that kind of thing. It's like, I'm going over here to do this. It's a very proactive energy. And one that doesn't require a small amount of imagination and vision, Aquarius, which you have in spades. I mean, you really need that if you are going to bring strong magician energy. It's Three of Pentacles in reverse, though. It's a recognition that in the first instance, you are going to have to start this process alone. I mean, it turns the right way up very, very quickly. But this is requiring some level of self-initiation by you. Honestly, I really don't like the Five of Wands at the bottom of the desk. I almost mentioned it before when we were talking about the Six of Wands, because for me, you can't really read either of those cards in isolation. The presence of one implies the other. But if the other doesn't show up, then what we've got is victory with no struggle, and therefore something meaningless, or struggle with no chance of victory, which is also awful. The best way for these cards to show up is Five of Wands in the upright, or the reverse, actually, because that's a stabilization energy in that. And then the Six of Wands in the upright. Yes, we struggled, we prevailed. This is saying the struggle starting here, and the victory isn't certain. The victory isn't guaranteed. We can't move forwards to victory. We can't go backwards either. So can you work with that chaotic energy and start to order reality around you, self-initiated first, but then bringing other people on board as and when necessary in order to move forwards? Five of Wands is a combative energy, and we've got everything from play fighting right the way up to all-out war indicated by this card. But we also have, is that not the most extraordinarily beautiful death card you've ever seen in your life? The detail on it is stunning. Look at this. It's all changed this season. But there's something really quite, it's so pointless as to be ludicrous to try and resist death. Death is here to create space. This is messy. Death is going to ride right through the center of that and create this space for the new things to emerge. Part of the new thing that's emerging is you in a leadership position, Aquarius, and that doesn't mean, necessarily with 5,000 people at your back. It could be within your friendship group, could be within your family. It's you taking charge, Aquarius, and I know that that's going to sound obnoxious, but this is what it is. So I'm going to leave it here because I've prattled on for far longer than I meant to. I'm going to go to the extended now. If you would like to join me, you're very welcome to do so. You can do that on Selfie, you can do that on Circle. I would be delighted to see you in either place. If you would like to book a reading with me, the links for that are also in the description box below. And if you're curious about the classes that I run, but you don't have the time to commit to joining the community, I have actually put some of the class recordings up for sale as well, so you can study at your own pace. If any of that sounds good to you, all of that stuff is in the description box below. Otherwise, let's get over to the extended and see what's going on here, because I think you can feel this coming, Aquarius. I think you know it's coming, and it's almost like you're trying not to look at it, but it's getting closer. I'm not entirely sure what the fuck it is that goes down in Cancer season, but I'm definitely seeing these repeated messages coming through again and again and again. Different angles, but the theme is the same in terms of what's going on in the background, you know. So, know that I love you all very, very much, and I'll see you soon.